talking all things theatre and events.
The shows that would have been at Sadler's Wells or Birmingham Rep or sometimes National Studio and stuff like the day before, and then would be in a community space in Gloucester the day after.
Late 2017, when we started talking about what we need to do to get that little bit bigger.
Lighting designers are working with video, even if they don't sort of necessarily realise.
The Stage Is Yours podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Stage Is Yours podcast. With me, your host Cal Graham, joined as always by producer Dan, and we're talking all things theatre and events. On today's podcast, we're joined by Timothy Kelly. We talk all about his work in lighting and video design, from his creative process to the shows that he's been involved with. We also dive into the world of creative captioning and creating inclusive theatre. Tim's done a lot of work in this area, so I was really keen to pick his brains. So let's not waste any more time. Timothy Kelly, the stage is yours. Joining us on the podcast today, we have Timothy Kelly. How are you, my friend?
I am good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, all right. All things considered. So on the podcast today, obviously, you are. How would you describe yourself? I feel that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Have your a wide range of things that you get up to in the industry. Let's put it that way.
I think
have a bash at that.
I usually tend to go for theatre creative nowadays. Basically, I work across disciplines, so I do a bit of lighting design, a bit of projection design, some production management, some photography. Occasionally, I work box office. Yeah, bit of everything.
Well, when we first met, you were entirely front of house and box office, and finishing your degree in directing and performance.
Yes. I was doing writing, directing, performance at York, and wanted to be an actor. And then by the end of that degree, I wanted to be a lighting designer. But we met at Greenside while I was up volunteering on front of house during the Fringe, and gradually wormed my way into a box office manager after 3 years.
Yeah, I think it's we all started off I started off at Greenside, as a volunteer as well.
Did we start in the same year?
I think so.
I want to say
it was 20. It was Nicholson's first year was when I first started.
It must have been summer 2014.
14, I think. Yeah, I was trying to figure it out because I've did a podcast with Darren and Tara a couple of weeks ago, and we were chatting, and I was trying to figure out exactly when it was, and that's when we came up when it was. But then again, Darren and Tara aren't entirely sure when Greenside officially started because there were bits before it, and then so I think we did start in the same year, so it's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about kind of, do you have a favorite kind of discipline? Do you kind of, is there anything you prefer? Do you prefer going down your kind of, obviously everything diversifies as you go and we all pick up different skills, but do you have anything that you're really keen about that's like, what's your main focus at the moment?
Well, I don't want to pick favourites, but but I feel bad for the others. But I think I'm certainly the lighting and video design are the areas that I'm focusing on. I enjoy production management as well, but that's I've sort of fallen into production management because I've done a fair bit of work between departments that it kind of made sense.
I know that feeling.
Do that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's production management's always one of those tricky ones of having enough knowledge in lots of areas to kind of be able to understand lots of things, and I think a lot of people kind of inadvertently end up doing it if you work across lots of disciplines. I certainly know that myself from things that from over the years, really. So let's talk around your work around. You do a lot of stuff, and I've obviously seen it and knowing yourself and chatting through things. A lot of work around accessibility and trying to kind of open things up, and it's something I'm really keen to kind of showcase on with the podcast. Really, is lots of different kind of things, what work's going on out there, what people are doing to kind of try and help things and make everyone more aware that these things are happening, and that this work is going on.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of my a lot of my work has been around accessibility for deaf audiences and theatre makers. So I do a fair bit of captioned work with sort of creative captioning and with like a deaf and hearing cast and an ensemble of people. But I've also done some work in. I was going to say last year. It's not, still 2020, thank God. So in 2019, in October, I did a show at Soho called Not Fucking Sorry, which had a neurodivergent team, which was just one of the most rewarding shows I've ever worked on. So much fun. It's this sort of queer cabaret. So with the neurodivergent team, and they just all had so much energy and so much passion for the work they were making and devising together that it was just totally infectious. I had an absolute blast on that show. But also, it was queer cabaret, so it was this sort of messy, high energy. I just got to flash stuff, which is always nice. I find a lot of my usually when I design, I like to go for quite slow fades with really nice angles and that sort of thing. And then this this one, I was just like, this is my chance to just flash it.
Make a point. There are lights here. I'm not trying to make it look.
But also like tying back into accessibility, because the team and the audience are neurodivergent, we had to make sure that all of that flashy stuff was still done in an accessible way. So we worked very closely with a company called Access All Areas, and we basically sat through in tech and worked through each state and was like, how slow, how fast can we get any of these chases so that they're not going to trigger anyone that's sort of photosensitive or anything? How much contrast do we have to have in the scene? So it was this really detailed work to make sure that it was accessible, which was really enjoyable. It meant that every now and again there'd be something, I had a vision of the scene and I'd sort of be planning it, and then we'd sort of look at it together and be like, this isn't accessible, so we had to come up with a new solution. And I love that sort of work. I love those sorts of challenges because they force you to think outside the box and come up with other solutions that you might not have necessarily thought of in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the challenge of making something accessible. Actually, sometimes you can't do what we would consider the normal thing for theatre, and it's those little tiny things that you go, oh well, actually no, I can't do that, so how do we work around that? Despite kind of the obvious things that everyone kind of goes, oh, you can't do that, like massive loud explosions and these kind of things that I think a lot of people associate with access and making something accessible. But actually there's a lot more subtlety.
There's a lot more nuance to it. I mean, I'm by no means an expert at all in this, but I do have a bit of experience in making accessible work, and actually a lot of times you can also do the sorts of things that you might think you aren't able to do, as long as you take the care to do them properly. So things like loud explosions, that sort of things, where you might not be able to do a sudden loud explosion, but there might be a version of it where you can still get quite loud, but it's about changing the type of explosion noise and whether it really ramps up slowly and that sort of thing. There's all sorts of things that you can think about. There's no definitive answers for it. So you've just got to, ultimately you've got to be working in a team with people that have real experience in that field. Companies like Access All Areas that know what they're talking about and can guide you to find that happy medium that isn't just go, oh, you know what, we'll just have the house lights on and turn the volume down, because that's not
works
being
for some,
creative,
but not,
is it?
Yeah, I think that's the key, having creative solutions to it and not just doing the obvious of, I'm all for relaxed performances, don't get me wrong, but I think there's kind of, like you said, you could be much more creative and make it seem less obvious that it's a relaxed performance.
Exactly, and I think there's a bit of a push for sort of relaxed as standard. So the idea that actually you shouldn't be designing a show that you then have to do a relaxed version of. You should be designing something that is inherently,
from the start.
So I did a bit of that. I sort of done a fair bit of sort of creative captioning work, which varies from show to show how that shows itself. I did a show called Sirens in 2018, and then we sort of remade it from scratch again in 2019 for a new tour of it. Totally rewrote the whole thing, recast, redesigned, which was a massive undertaking. But we were exploring with that. We had this big sort of canvas backdrop, and one of the things that when we'd spoken to deaf people, deaf artists that we're close with, that sort of thing, one of the things they'd said that they hate about captions was the fact that usually in caption performances the screen is in one place and the actors are in another, and you have to keep looking back and forward. So we were sort of really focused on getting captions to follow the actors. So we had to do the normal tech for the show and then do a whole other day-long tech session on just every line of captioning, positioning that to where the cast member is at any given time. But we did that with a level of granularity that I haven't seen before. So I was really proud of what we managed to achieve with that. We're not talking about like 3 positions across the stage. It could be either left, middle, center. We're talking about like it follows exactly where they are at their height, that sort of thing. And we had 9 different projection surfaces, like flaps up in the stage as well. So to potentially hop onto some of those at any given point. And then for the redesign as well, we had the added fun of the whole show's this sort of story being told by the 3 main characters. So the sort of projection design was these drawings that animated in as the characters retold their story. But we wanted to give the cast that were devising the show some sort of ownership over that. So the drawings that were coming in had been drawn by the cast members that I then vectorized and animated to come on the stage. And likewise with the captions, each character spoke in their own handwriting. So I made fonts of each of those actors' handwritings so that we could get that sort of personality coming through within the captions themselves. Because you lose a lot of information about personality and that sort of thing when you caption a show. You've got to think about a deaf audience can't hear the intonation or the accent or the sort of vocal timbre of any of the characters. So we were looking at ways, how do we put that information back in a visual way? And getting them to speak in their own handwriting was one of those ways. Adjusting the size and position, another of those ways. Do they flicker on? Do they come on with an effect? All sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really good. And like I said, it's coming up with creative ways of doing it. I mean, I think most decent sized theatres now will caption things, but that can be as simply as a screen that's sat to one side. And I think we need to kind of move on from that now. It's fine, that should just be accepted that at a very, very bare minimum, that's what is available.
I mean, we're at a position now. There are companies like Stage Text who do great work, providing screens and the services to caption shows. So, you know, especially in London, pretty much every show in a mid to large scale venue will have one or two caption performances of every show, and there'll be Stage Text will come in and they'll rig their stage screen and they'll get the captions in, and that's great, but it's not integrated. So it's a really good service that they provide, because it means that with very little effort, venues can make sure that they're providing some level of accessibility. But actually, we are at a point that sort of accessibility should be being baked in. It shouldn't just be, okay, we'll do 2 shows.
I think it makes a huge difference being able to integrate it with what's going on and make it part of the show. I think it makes such a difference.
100%.
Yeah, very much so. So let's talk whilst we're on captioning. The Captionator, your creation.
The Captionator was my lockdown 1 project right at the start. It was basically born out of I had a show recording that, you know, where at the start of lockdown 1, right, where everyone started going, oh, let's share all our old archive videos. Let's just put a load of theatre out on the internet for free. And there's this really lovely moment where everyone just opened up their hard drives and dumped everything onto the internet. And we had an old archive recording of one of the shows we did with Cup of Brew at Volts in 2019, and we were like, great, let's put that on the internet. And I was like, we definitely have to caption it, and it's going on the internet. So I had this hour-long video to caption, and I don't know if you've ever tried to caption an hour-long video, but
I've done some, but not for an hour. I've done literally 4 or 5 minute videos, and it's tedious at 4 and 5 minutes.
So long. And I was thinking, why is it taking this long when the video is an hour long? Why is it taking me 6 hours to caption this video, individually moving each caption into the right position? I was like, when live, I can press a button on each caption, so it would only take me an hour, because that's the length of the show. So I knocked up a little patch in Isadora, which is my favorite program in the world, that in a really, really bodgy DIY way, with a lot of JavaScript and some really dodgy use of JavaScript, basically meant that you could watch a video that you already have a script for, in like we did, and you could operate it live as if you were operating it live in the theatre, and it would remember those timings and spit out a caption file, an SRT file, with all those timings in, that you could then upload to YouTube, which has been an absolute lifesaver. So anything I've had to caption since then with the script, obviously it only works if you've already got a script for it. If you've got to transcribe it, that's a whole other level of of fun. There are lots of solutions out there, but there was nothing. It was really infuriating to me that something like YouTube Studio, that's got some good captioning stuff, but there's no way you could just upload a script and go, you know what, I just want to watch this through, and press go when each caption should be. It just seemed like a really intuitive way to do the timings, rather than having to drag things to the right positions.
Especially when it comes to something like theatre, where that timing matters that little bit more, and you want to kind of make sure that it happens at the right time, and that it doesn't kind of get behind itself as much as the YouTube one is great. And I certainly utilize the YouTube one at the moment for for throwing these audio podcasts up at the moment, and it's 95% is pretty much there, unless I've got someone on with a really strong accent, and then sometimes it just goes.
Yeah.
Just starts making up sentences. It's just quite interesting to see what it comes up with at times. But
what
is great.
I've started to do, I've started to use YouTube's auto transcribe feature to get a first pass of it, and then I will download that, rip all the timings out, which seems counterintuitive, but I've found it really useful for it to do its sort of auto-generated transcription, and then go through in the text file, really quickly change all of the errors it's made.
Yeah.
Then pass it through the captionator to put the timings back in a sensible fashion.
Yeah.
And then upload it, which is a lot of work, but actually has saved
Well, it takes that initial kind of block work down and puts those kind of foundations in that sense. So kind of, why not? It's there, make use of it. No, I think it's really good. And I loved the fact in first lockdown that everyone went, what, and just dumped this massive...
There was the really beautiful like solidarity at the start of first lockdown,
like,
especially considering no one thought that theatres would still be closed by this point. Like, everyone was convinced it was going to be for about a couple of months at the most. 3 weeks was what they said. Yeah. I don't think anyone thought it was actually going to be 3. I feel like at the time people will say 3 weeks. It is probably going to be a bit longer, but
I was out on tour, and we were, in Bradford of all places. Walking out of stage door, having just finished putting the show in, having handed the stage over to the company to do just a spacing rehearsal that night, and we were literally at stage door, and everyone's phone pinged at the same time, and you all just look at each other and go, well, that's not good if everyone's phone goes off at the same moment. And then ended up sat in the bar at the Jury's Inn in Bradford with the stage manager reading the email to us going, well, that's us for certainly the next 3 weeks. And then it kind of went from there and just kept going and going, and we're like, brilliant.
I was in a get out when it was announced, because March was like one of the busiest months of work that I had ever had, which was really nice, but then all suddenly came to this crashing halt. One show I was doing closed early because before the lockdown was announced, because a cast member and a member of the technical team were symptomatic. Don't think they actually ended up having it at that point, but they had symptoms. So because this was before mass testing was available, so without being able to test people, they just had to close the whole show. So the show then sat in stasis. That was actually relatively early March. It was probably not far off the 10th or something like that.
Yeah, it was. I think it was like the 16th was when we were pulled for the first week at least.
Because we went into lockdown on the 23rd.
Yeah,
and the 16th was when.
I think that's when they announced.
I think that's when that was when they announced that you shouldn't go to the theatre and that all the theatres closed. So we then did the get out. We were doing the get out on the 23rd. Just sort of like we had the radio on in the corner as we're doing it, and everyone would just stop what they're doing and listen to the radio. As Boris Johnson was like, "You must stay at home." We were all like, "Right."
I remember the
okay then.
I remember the 17th being us having to do a get out I say it was a get out. We'd literally just finished putting it in, and I felt so sorry for the local boys who just finished putting it in, and we're like, we're back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to put 6 trucks worth of show back on its wheels, because we were moving weekly, so it couldn't even sit there. So we were like, okay, and it was the weirdest day ever. It just kind of, everyone was like, we don't know what's going on. That end of that week as well, because our show was supposed to be going international, were supposed to be kind of splitting some of the set, so we were getting some new
Right.
bits the next week. So we were taking some bits off, going, well, do we have to take this apart because it's going to go on shipping containers to go to Japan? Like,
No, it's not.
didn't know. we were at the time, we were like, we just don't know. And it was, yeah, and we were kind of packing stuff, and we were going, right, well, how do we pack it for as if it's like the end of the tour so they can come off the trucks easily? Like, all of like white light stuff, do we put that at the doors so that it can come off, or do we pack it like it's going to come out ready again? And they all got packed differently depending on what department. So lighting got packed with white light as if it was going to go back to white light. Sound went on normally, and all the set just went on half for Japan and half for I think Cardiff. We were supposed to be at next. Like, it was the oddest and longest day ever. We started at 9. Out should have finished like 3. I think we didn't leave the theatre till like 7, 8 o'clock that night. Like, it was, it was such a weird day and such weird times when we were all like, no, we'll see you all in like a few weeks. Like, we'll see you in, I think we got cancelled for 3 weeks initially. And we were like, okay, fine. And ironically, we were missing out one of the most awkward venues. So we were like, we're quite glad we're not going there, because we weren't sure if the show was going to fit, but it would be so tight. We were like, great. But then, yeah, it was so weird. So weird. But yeah, it's strange old times, to say the least. So
certainly is.
I mean, we're sat on my lockdown baby now. This is what mine's becoming. I was like, I need something. I think everyone within the theatre industry has had to go, I still need something to create, something to do, and something creative, something that I can do and go from there. So, and why not? Exactly. I've talked about this for ages. We joked about it on tour that I should set up a podcast initially with some friends and be like, it should just be like stories from when you're on tour and stuff. And I was like, well, that's fine, but do you really want some of those to be out in the world? Because some of them, as hilarious as they are, you're like, I'm not sure they're that. So it was kind of there, and I was like, well, do you know what? I'm just going to do it and see where it goes. So yeah. Anyway, enough Rona chat, because I've spoke far too much coronavirus over the last few months. But so let's chat about your kind of lighting and video work, and kind of obviously that's where you're wanting to be, and kind of what your favorite kind of thing is. So so when you come up to a new show, do you have kind of a process? Kind of how do you kind of really start to work through that, and kind of where your ideas come from, really?
I mean, I've been very blessed in my career so far, in that I have taken a lot of weird, odd jobs. So my process has, by necessity, varied massively. So I don't know if I could put sort of my finger on like what the process would be, but I think it all stems from getting into design conversations really early, and those early conversations are some of the most important. It's all about the collaboration for me. I don't know whether I'd say, there's some particular research I do or that sort of thing. Obviously there is research that I do, but for me, everything stems from the set, and from the lighting design, and from the sound design, and from what's happening from stage. It's got to be completely reactive. So the most important thing you can do in your process, I think, is be present and be in those conversations, and really thinking about why other people are making the decisions that they're making and the creative choices they're making, and extrapolate their reasonings and apply it to yourself. It's about trying to find sort of the germ of their idea and what they're going for, and extrapolating outwards. For me, lighting it's all about the space. It's all about making the space feel different, depending on what mood you want to create, what narrative you want to tell. So yeah, in that way, it's all got to come from, okay, so what do I need to do to make this space that the set designer's created feel a certain way for this scene, that sort of thing. maybe if I did some more, bigger naturalistic shows or that sort of thing, I'd have to adapt my process to a more, I'll do a lot of historical research, that sort of thing. I've never had a show so far where that's really been a thing that I've had to do a lot of, because the concepts have always been a bit more abstract.
Yeah.
And then video-wise, video is another weird one, because the way I always describe video to people is that, like, it's always the optional bit. You can't do a show without lights. You can't do a show without set, even if the set is the lack of set.
Yeah.
There is still a physical space, and you can't do a show without sound. So again, even if that sound design is the lack of sound, video is not really the same. So it means that video can come at a totally different point in the process.
Yeah.
It can either come actually quite late on, because the set designers built in a projection service or something, and then they're like, oh, we need a projection designer. Or it can come in right from the start. So Sirens, for example, we were like, oh, we want to do something really integrated. So the projections would be interacting with what's happening on stage. The cast would be able to, there were points where there's one bit where there's a sign that had fallen down, and the cast member would push it and the sign would go back up, that sort of thing, which meant that we had to have a projector in the rehearsal room with the set, and we were building that stuff in the rehearsal room as we went. There are other shows where, again, this isn't something that I've done yet, but I know there are other shows where sometimes a video designer might have a collection of footage, that sort of thing, and sort of show up at tech and place it. Or there's shows where specific content's being made with the cast, so that has to come at a certain point. But it really varies on why they've chosen to get a video designer in, and why they've chosen to have video, which for each show will vary completely. So I think the most important thing in the video design process is ascertaining what the director and the designer want to get out of the video,
absolutely.
because its purpose can be totally different from show to show.
I think video is something that is people's, from a creative point of view, is starting to think more into, because its creative potential is endless. I certainly know that there's a lot more, having spoken to Nick Whitehead, who's head of video and lighting at Adlib in Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying it's really something that it's changing, and almost people are starting to think of a projector as a light itself. The show that I was out on tour with, Red Shoes, the amount of projection in that was absurd, was ridiculous, and we would spend ages lining that up, and Matt bits of set that would fly in and stuff like that, and we would be there. But it had to be spot on and perfect, because you're flying into completely white portals that do that, and if it doesn't line up, there's just these gaps in it all, and it doesn't look as it is, or as it should. And that was something from that. And there's one moment in that where the main dancer's at the back, and it is genuinely, and it's not a light, but is intended to look like it, that it is a follow spot that's just opening up, like the iris is opening, and from there, and to use for her shadow onto the BP, and that's through the video. That's something that content wise, I think a lot of people are starting to think of from the start, that actually, and as you said, from even just a simple captioning solution, you can be much more creative with video. So I think video is something that I think some lighting designers might start to kind of go, oh, well, actually, let's start to look at that and start to bring it in, and really start to think of actually, oh, well, there's a whole nother world. Certainly live events and gigs, things, that's already changing, and the amount of video content and control in there baffles me and blows my mind. Sometimes we think about stuff and Nick sits and talks to me about it, and I'm like, I like to think I know what you're talking about, but when it comes to the ultimate creation of it, I'm like, sorry,
the other thing is you'll find a lot of designers are working, lighting designers are working with video, even if they don't sort of necessarily realise. Because when you go on EOS and you stick your pixel mapping on and you use those presets, that is video. So
yeah, I think it is definitely something that is coming more and more in the world of projectors and stuff. And now that projectors are becoming, that there's been that shift that, and Nick made the very good point of that a lot of the time in the past with video, they've been working off technology that's not actually designed for theatre. It's technology that's kind of been, oh, well, that works really well for a completely different industry. So I've pulled it in and made it work. Whereas now I think there are bits and pieces that are coming through with D3 and Disguise and stuff that's really being focused to that. So I think it's the potential to interlink all of these different things is, well, like I said, there's endless potential with it because it's a computer sat there that you can create.
You can chuck anything you want.
Anything. So I think that is something that we will start to see a little bit more of.
The idea of video as lighting is really exciting to me. I was looking at one of the shows I worked on in uni was called Hyde Park. It was an old early modern play, but it was being directed by our head of the course, high up, and being designed, set lighting and everything by one of the department technicians. But I was lucky enough to be associate on that, and we had these massive moving head projectors on there. I don't know how the uni ended up with them. I mean, they had some good kit at York, but they also had these giant DL3 moving projectors that I'd never seen anywhere else. And to be honest, that's the only time I can think of that they used them. I think they must have ended up getting them from being donated them or something.
If there were old Robe fixtures, Robe had a habit in the early days of just gifting people kit, show it, to get it out there when they were trying to build their name. So they might well have got them if there was some of the Robe I can't remember exactly what they were called, but I know there were quite a few of those knocking around. But no one knew.
I think they were high end.
What to do.
But I can't. I think they were high end. But and the department really had no idea. They were I don't know what we do with it. So this was the only time I can think of that they used them. But we basically just used them as big moving gobos, which was really fun. You could just someone went out and filmed some footage of some leaves on a tree, which we blurred the shit out of, and then fed it through those projectors so you could map that onto the floor and onto the back and just add whatever texture we want. And I don't think anyone watching that show would have been like, oh yeah, there's some video in it. I would be very surprised if anyone watching it even noticed that there was projection, but it was there to create this sense of constant movement and that sort of thing. And that sort of idea really, really excites me as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to integrate the two and really bring them into it and try and merge the two together. I think that's certainly the design through from Red Shoes and stuff like that is all to kind of mix it in and is a mixture between all three departments coming together in that moment of the set design, the lighting, and then the video guys. And the video guys are there, and this is the second time it's going around. So in tech, they're just there, just at perfecting what they did first time around. So these guys are just there, and they're just firing things through, and it becomes really slick and really great. And I don't think and becomes, like I said, just seamless, and that it just adds. No one's aware of what's happening. There's endless possibilities. And like I said, the set design was entirely white. nightmare on the getting. Obviously they've got to stay white as best you can, but
get their shoe protectors on.
shoe protectors on, white gloves, quite literally white gloves. I remember the first time it came round, it was white gloves, because I did it as a casual when it first came round the first time. So then when I was on tour with it the second time, I could just remember these flats. Don't touch the show face was the general rule. And it was but these pristine white portals, 4 of them, and you're like, great. But then it's just endless possibilities for the video guys, and even just on their own as 4 white things looked incredible, but just endless.
Especially if they're like perfectly crisp white, because you just never see that in a theatre because it's so hard to keep things exactly.
Stage department on a Tuesday morning out with the white paint and the paintbrush, do that. They would even paint the seams in the thing to try and minimize the seams of the flat.
Nice.
Like it was the amount of detail in that to try and do that. So the kind of, I mean, it was for the Red Shoes Ballet kind of section, so it was the whole point of the show. And it was just, I mean, plug it, it's on iPlayer for the next year, but because it was on a Christmas day, but it's there, and it's it was fun, and it was just like, and you're kind of like, I think part of me, if I was creating that, I kind of, obviously you've got the director's vision, but there's just such endless possibility kind of what you could do with it. So I think something like that is really kind of where we're starting to move a little bit, that video's been this department that I've worked in theatres where video's attached to the sound department. I've worked in theatres where it's attached to the lighting department, and depending on where you go, it has a different home. Whereas I think now it's kind of becoming, it's much more aligned with lighting now, I think.
I think, it does sit in that weird place between them, though. I think most places I've worked at, it's been sound department, really. But I think that's because the sound department guys tend to be a bit more computery than lighting people.
I think a little bit, certainly on tour.
Partly, you have to use. That's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but I think sound designers have to think a lot more about the software they're using, about codecs and bit rates and all of that sort of thing, which lends itself, and about networking, because it's always the sound people that have to set up the show control. So as soon as you've got all that sort of stuff, it feels like if you were going to put it in either lighting or sound, thematically it feels like it should be in lighting, because actually the result is closer to lighting, but actually in terms of the technical skills required to manage it,
certainly on tour
are often more sound.
Certainly on tour, it was attached to us as the lighting department, that the responsibility of video, because there wasn't an individual touring video tech. We didn't have anyone touring with us who was designated as a touring video. We'd have do we have a video proddy? I'm not sure we did. I think video was entirely, once it was set up and handed over, I think it was predominantly Yosh, who was our LX number 2. Her main focus on the in was the video kind of lineup and stuff like that, and she'd be there till stupid o'clock on a Monday night doing lineups. She'd be there till sort of, I think the call for video lineup was till 1 a.m. on the Monday night, because obviously they just want they can't have anyone else in the way. So they'd be, after everything else is in, calling bits of set in and out, and spend there to that. But because there were just masks and stuff, so like obviously we just didn't want shadows and things, so there'd be bits of set flying in, so she'd have to map masks into those so that you didn't have that. There were bits where we were reflecting water onto the metallic bit of this bottom thing, so they reflected and wobbled. Like it was, they kind of. So there were lots of she would spend hours lining that up. So that was a weird one on tour, that it was attached to us, so we kind of had to kind of start to get to really know it. And I certainly know from one of Josh's point of view, we've done a bit, but not a lot to that level of having to be like, oh well, if this goes wrong, we need to have enough knowledge to be able to start to figure it out. So it was, but I mean, Josh nailed it, to be honest. She just, and her she was the perfect person for it, because her OCD was just, is that for that lineup would be there. Like it was, it was great. But that was an interesting one. That was because it was so, the whole design of it was so aligned to lighting, it made more sense for us to kind of be the ones looking at, because that's what its primary use was in that sense. And obviously it was all completely integrated into our control, so we controlled everything anyway. So it was, it's one of those. I think that's where videos had that little thing that's bounced around a little bit. But I think
that's what I think. I think it feels like in the show itself is more aligned to lighting, but sort of in-house at the venues, I've personally found it's often the sound department will head up the management of the video.
I think that might start to change a little bit if things do start to kind of move, that becomes a much bigger part of the kind of world.
Absolutely.
Now. I think you will start to see that individual video departments will pop up and have their own kind of management. I don't envy them having to try and add stuff on top of some theatre setups. I think it's going to be...
but this is the problem for theatres setting up video departments, is that because video is still seen as this sort of optional extra that not every show has, there's a lot of theatres that are like, can we employ someone full-time to be head of our video department when, a third of the shows might have video and and the rest don't. So there's a conversation that I think the industry needs to have over, like, if video is going to be its own discipline, do we need to really start like using it in more stuff?
I think if it becomes a kind of, I think if they kind of, I think from a live events and gig kind of side of things, I would argue that it is almost already, and that I think what even medium-sized tour now doesn't have a few LED screens and walls and kind of things that you can create something on that would fall into that video department. So I think that's already kind of there. But obviously lighting's just kind of gone, well, it's pretty much what we do anyway. Like, they're just jumping all over it anyway. So I don't know. I think videos are one of those, but I think as people come up with more creative solutions and realize that, and because now things are being made specifically for theatre video creation in that, and making it a little bit not more straightforward, but aimed at having that creative element and being that it works for that.
Will be interesting to see as well the effect of lockdown on it, because people have been having to use video in a totally different way to create digital work over the last year. And it'll be interesting to see what lessons have been learnt in this last year and how that then feeds back into where we can get back into a theatre.
I think everyone's kind of tried to learn new skills and develop things, and it's quite interesting chatting to lots of people. It's the one side of chatting about Corona and COVID and things that actually I find very interesting at the moment, is how people have adapted and what have they done to keep producing things. And everyone you talk to in the theatre world has gone, well, we've had to produce films and movies and stuff, and we were really hesitant. We've never gone to before, but actually we really love it, and that we can our attention to detail can go to this whole other level because you can be so specific in what you're making people look at. I've spoken to Hot Coals, who have essentially, they're now Hot Coals Productions rather than Hot Coals Theatre, essentially, because they've sped up their whole timeline of what they do, and they've gone, actually, this is. I
was lucky enough to work on their first film.
You came on the podcast.
I haven't listened to that episode. Oh, is that episode out?
It's not live.
It's not live yet.
16th of January, something, I think.
16th of January, nice.
Maybe 20th now.
But I was lucky enough to work with them, and it was really lovely couple of days shooting, but also the sort of opportunity to bring in some sort of theatrical sensibilities to the way that we were making films. So we were doing something closer to the sort of creative captioning that I would do in theatre on film, which is something you don't really see very often. So that was a lot of fun. They're a lovely bunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time chatting to them and things like that as well. But I think it's that's quite interesting of like where people have gone with what they've developed and how lockdown is going to impact things. I think and what people have done to try and keep producing stuff during lockdown and stuff. And I know there's things like the show must go online, which obviously are doing essentially plays through Zoom and stuff like that, which I think is great. I'm a little bit, part of me goes, it's relying on Zoom to create that. There's a little bit of delay or something like that. just sets me on edge. But it's
Well,
yeah,
I've really enjoyed in lockdown. I've really enjoyed the sort of work that really leans into Zoom and leans into the internet aesthetics. There's this really cool show that New Diorama hosted online, which was May, June time, something like that, called workfromhome.txt, which was a sort of digital adaptation of a show that did Vaults last year. But it was this sort of they got the Vaults version. They got the I think I didn't see it. I think they got the audience to read out bits of the script, that sort of thing. But certainly in the Zoom version, they did that. So the chat message, you'd start the show, you'd be sitting there, and no one would know what's happening. You'd be sitting there with this bunch of strangers going like, "What's going on?" Then suddenly the chat would start speaking to you and would feed you lines, and you'd be saying them, and the chat would be feeding other people lines, and they'd be saying them. And actually, that sort of like the delay and the awkwardness of Zoom, was part of it, but also the sort of the way that actually being in the theatre, sure, that's a communal experience. It, absolutely is. But in some ways, a Zoom meeting can be more communal because it forces you to be like face to face to a bunch of people and interact with them in a different way. So I really enjoy. It was sort of midway through, just coming into the summer, that people were starting to really experiment with. It's a totally new type of work, right? Like live digital performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's anything when things do open up, or whether there's still going to be that kind of offering that's not. There's obviously going to be the initial rush to everyone to get back, or like I hope so, that everyone get back to a live show, and because obviously you can't recreate that digitally. However, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether some people continue to kind of carry that offering on. And from having spoken to some companies and things like having this digital offering, suddenly their potential reach of an audience is so much bigger because it's just sat there on the internet. Anyone.
Well, I think we're going to see. I mean, we've already seen an explosion of stream theatre, but I think we're going to see streamed theatre continue. And to be honest, we should see streamed theatre become standard. You know what I mean? Like it's mad to me that we do runs of shows in fringe venues that maybe run for a month, and then that's it.
Yeah, it's done. It's
gone, dead. When we could just sure, it's not realistic for most fringe shows that don't have any money to do a full professional, cinema quality recording, but you can do a recording of it, and you can stream that for posterity. Yeah, sure, you don't want to cannibalize your in-person sales, so maybe you release it afterwards. But if the quality is not as good, then you do it a bit cheap. But you know what I mean? It can give shows a life.
A lot of, certainly from the fringe at the moment, there's a lot of talk about digital offering, and obviously Zoo did Zoo TV that was massively successful and did really well off that. So there's now this kind of talk of whether that's something that going forward is going to be something that you can deliver and offer alongside and I think if there are any restrictions coming potentially for 2021, then obviously that's a potential that.
Well, I think the plan is that Fringe 2021 is going to be digital and in person, isn't it? That's what they said.
Towards,
which will be exciting. I think. I mean, we'll see what that actually turns out to be, but there's an opportunity there to do something really.
I think there is across the industry. I mean, having worked on a film that's then, or on a theatre show that's then been filmed to be screened in theatres or screened in cinemas and TV and stuff, it's a very odd. It's an unusual day, and working with those guys is great, and you learn a whole different kind of thing. But it's kind of, and you're relighting your show to kind of for camera and things like that. Without ruining the aesthetic of it, which I think is great.
If live stream shows are going to become the norm, that you can either be there in person or you can see
Yeah.
the live stream, there's going to be, us lighting designers are going to have to learn film lighting, because we're going to have to be designing our shows for the camera as well as the human eye. I think that's going to be something that we're all really going to have to think about in the actually not very
I think it
distant
was
future at all.
from, not that I was hugely involved in the kind of discussion of the design side of it, just based on we had a production guy, Sam Baker, come back in to help with that stuff, just to balance people's hours and things. And we were kind of there and working through, and it was a really kind of, I think there was like, it was the finding that compromise ground in the middle between what the director from the camera point of view wanted, and be like, well, actually be great if we get this, and Sam going, well, that's fine, but it's still filmed with a live audience, it's not filmed in an empty theater, so it's, you still have to do that. And obviously it was Pauline Constable who is the LD, so she was like, obviously she's protective over what she wants it to look like, so it's so it was a really nice actually compromise between the two, and those guys kind of going, oh, okay, yeah, fine, we get that, we'll compromise here and there and do that. I think my overriding memory, mainly because I spent quite a while sorting it out, was they need a clean black box, so you just need that frame. And we had a massive run of birdies right across the front edge of the stage. We were like, Joyce, so we sank all them into the dip trap. But it was, so it's quite interesting. It's a massive learning curve from my point of view as well, because it's the first time I've ever been on anything quite like that and around it. So it was quite interesting to see me part of that. But seeing that combination, and I think you're absolutely right, that I think going forward there's going to be a lot more having that very much in mind, that this could well be.
Well, I think it's going to become the default, right? You do a photo call. Certainly, speaking from the slightly more fringy, like publicly funded theatre world, you'll probably do your photo call during your second dress. So maybe on the day you open, or if you're lucky, the day before. But more usually a few hours before you open, you'll do your dress run that you have a photographer and they'll photograph it. I think it will become the norm that either a first preview or that dress rehearsal will get filmed as well.
Yeah, I think so.
And that'll be the sort of the standard process for it. And I think a lot of theatre photographers will start to pivot to videography as well, so you'll get an explosion of like cheap, sort of not completely professional like TV quality broadcast, but like decent enough for the internet videography. Maybe if you're lucky, a 2-camera setup, but just on DSLR, something like quite simple, that can be offered cheaply to everyone, and that will sort of probably come in the price of the theatre photography budget.
Just different offerings of packages, isn't it, of kind of what you can offer and stuff like that. I think it's definitely something that I think is gonna, I think we will see grow, and I think people realize,
and it should, because it's an accessibility thing. As well.
I think
opens up
realize
venues,
that potential of what it can do and where it can go, and what you can then ultimately do with it. You can do an awful lot more when you've got the footage of the show sat there in a bunch of software, and
you can make money off a show that you've otherwise binned. Like, what's the point? The theatre industry is so wasteful. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it. I love working in the theatre industry, but it's so wasteful when you build a set for a 4-week run and then you bin it, when you put all that work into a 4-week run. And like, part of the joy of theatre is that it's ephemeral and it's transient, blah 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 blah, and it ceases to exist after the show's finished. Like, I get that, that's great, but
some
like
sustainability
that you can at least like still get some value out of it. It is 2021 now, like cameras exist, like we should be able to film we should be able to film stuff.
Absolutely. So I think it's definitely something that I think a lot of things will do. Well, I think let's wrap this up into kind of the end questions. Everyone who comes on the podcast gets asked the same 3 things, and it's just, they're a bit of a laugh, they're a bit of a joke. They're things that have stemmed from conversations on the back of a truck at 5-6 o'clock in the morning when you're all a bit tired and
Yeah.
a bit from that. But so this first one, I think I phrased differently for everyone who I ask it, but it just depends on them. If you had a dream show gig that you could work on, that you could be a part of, that you could, or that you'd want to see, what would that be for you?
I think my dream show will vary a lot. The thing that I really love about working in theatre and the work that I do is learning new skills every time I do a job, which is why I take slightly more interesting, often lesser paid, which my bank balance is not
Isn't that
grateful for,
Yeah.
but my work satisfaction is sort of more interesting jobs where I have to learn new things on the job and bodge stuff together. So I'd say my dream job is the job where I get to learn something different. So at this stage, something I want to learn or explore is like in captioning, for example, I want to use automatic follow spot tags and hook that data into captioning software so that you have captions actually follow actors in real time. I think that'd be really cool. I've been doing a bit of Arduino work lately. I'd love to do some shows where there's some like reactive stuff with sensors, that sort of thing. Anything where I can learn a new skill. That's
nice. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always new stuff to learn, definitely, like constantly. And I mean, the industry's constantly changing. There's new stuff coming out. I think it has. So there's always things, and trying to figure out where you can use technologies that aren't necessarily designed for that, and go, well, actually, that I can use that. Let's bring that in. And make it from that. So that's quite interesting. Second one. What's your go-to post shift snack?
Gin.
One thing.
just gin. Straight gin.
I mean, I don't know if you can see over my shoulder here. This is the remnants of my advent calendar.
I've been admiring it. It looks beautiful.
24. I got 24 different bottles of gin, or little miniatures.
I got a rubbish Cadbury's dairy milk one.
Not only does it exist, I'm still working my way through them because I think the ones I've got left are all the like Navy strength, super strong ones. So nice. I'm like, fine. Absolutely. I think that. I mean, some very interesting answers to that question. It's quite funny.
Edinburgh is just absolutely fueled.
I live across the road from the Holyrood gin distillery as well. So it's like, and it's not open properly at the moment. So it's literally obviously just shipping stuff in and out. But normally it's a bar and it's open all the time. So it's like, well,
pop across the road. Yeah,
just exactly. So it'd be fine. But yeah, certainly in lockdown, my gin consumption is probably or I say an all-time high. I was on tour, so probably not. But anyway, I think for a lot of people, that once you're done, sit back and relax and know that that's it.
Yeah,
and can hopefully on a job well done, that it's all gone.
Or on a job not well done. Yeah, and often that means more gin.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. And the final question, it's a bit of an interesting one, and everyone's got their own different answer to it. But what's the one piece of advice that you could give to someone starting out in their career? That one thing that kind of you've learned now that you would have wished you'd known when you'd started out?
It's a difficult one. So part of me is tempted to be like, say to 18-year-old Tim, sure, go study acting and directing, but just know before you start doing that that's not what you're gonna end up doing. And in 3 years' time, you're going to be like, man, this is rubbish. I don't want to be on stage and have to do warm-up games, absolutely the worst thing in the world. Hate them with a burning passion. Every now and again I'll be in a rehearsal room where they'll be like, they'll go to the designers, they'll be like, oh, come join in, and I'll be like, you are joking. Absolutely not. I've done 15 years of warm-up games. That's enough. So part of me would be like, 18-year-old Tim, just so you know, maybe start learning a bit about lighting design now. but also I don't know. I feel like I've only had the career I've had because I've come into technical theatre a really weird route. I don't think I'd be doing the same sort of work if I hadn't come through acting, come through directing, and then sort of found myself in technical theatre as the sort of marriage of like my photography interests and interest in lighting via the photography and interest in video via being a computer nerd when I was growing up. So I don't know whether I would give myself much advice, because I think if I'd changed, well, it's butterfly effect, isn't it? But I think if I'd changed anything, I'd be doing different sorts of work, and I really enjoyed the sort of work that I do. I would tell myself to get on top of my taxes, though.
I mean, I'm in the lucky situation where, I've not. The last job, my tax situation is quite good at the moment in the sense that I'm technically not self-employed at the moment, so it's kind of like, well,
yeah,
it makes my life a little bit easier in that sense. But yeah, I think the overarching note for what you just said is you enjoy what you do. Like, have those, if it's something you've got an interest in and then it can make you money, then
yeah,
even better. You've just got to enjoy what you do at the end of the day. So it makes life much easier in that sense when you can actually do what you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Tim, this has been great fun, mate, and really nice just to catch up and chat.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to the Stage Is Yours podcast. Want to know more? Then head over to all of our socials. You can find us at Stage Is Yours Pod, where you can catch a cheeky glimpse at some of our upcoming guests, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. This has been the Stage Is Yours podcast, talking all things theatre and events. Until next time.